Imagine spending your entire life searching for patterns, not just any patterns. The hidden patterns that quietly shape society, wealth, success, business, and even nature itself. Now imagine discovering one simple observation that would influence economics, business, productivity, management, and personal development for more than a century. This is the story of Vilfredo Pareto, a man whose curiosity led him to uncover one of the most powerful principles ever discovered. A principle that explains why a small number of causes often produce a large number of results. Today, millions of people know it as the 80-20 rule, but few know the fascinating story behind it. Let's begin. Our story starts in the year 1848. Vilfredo Federico Damaso Pareto was born in Paris, France. His father was an Italian engineer and political activist. His family valued education, logic, and independent thinking. From a young age, Pareto showed an exceptional talent for mathematics and analytical thinking. While many children were fascinated by stories and games, Pareto was fascinated by numbers. He wanted to understand how the world worked, not how people said it worked, but how it actually worked. This desire to understand reality would eventually change history. As he grew older, Pareto studied engineering. He became highly skilled in mathematics, mechanics, and problem-solving. His early career was not in economics. He worked as an engineer and later managed industrial companies. This practical experience exposed him to business, production, trade, and human behavior. And this is important, because Pareto was not just a theorist sitting in a classroom. He was observing real life. He was watching how wealth moved, how businesses operated, and how societies functioned. The more he observed, the more questions he had. Why were some people incredibly wealthy while most struggled? Why did success seem concentrated among a small group? Was this simply coincidence, or was there a deeper pattern? Years later, Pareto shifted his attention toward economics. At the time, many economists were focused on theories and assumptions. Pareto wanted data, he wanted evidence, he wanted numbers. So he began studying wealth distribution across different countries. He collected records, tax documents, economic reports, population data. And then he noticed something remarkable. No matter where he looked, wealth was not evenly distributed. A small percentage of people owned a very large percentage of wealth. The majority owned much less. The pattern appeared again and again and again. Different countries, different cultures, different economies. Yet the same imbalance appeared. At first, Pareto thought it might be accidental, but the evidence kept growing. The numbers refused to change. Something bigger was happening. Then came the moment that would make him famous. According to the popular story, Pareto was working in his garden. He noticed something interesting about his pea plants. A surprisingly small number of pea pods seemed to produce most of the peas. Most of the output came from a minority of the plants. Now, whether this exact story happened exactly as often told is debated by historians. But what matters is the observation. Pareto was beginning to see the same pattern everywhere, in wealth, in agriculture, in society. A small number of causes were producing a large number of effects. This realization fascinated him. Could it be that the world naturally organizes itself this way? Could imbalance be a fundamental feature of reality? As he continued his research, Pareto found that approximately 20% of the population often controlled around 80% of the wealth. The exact percentages varied. Sometimes it was 70-30, sometimes 90-10, sometimes 75-25. But the pattern remained. A minority produced a majority of outcomes. This became known as the Pareto distribution, and later the Pareto Principle. At the time, Pareto probably had no idea how influential this discovery would become. To him, it was simply an observation, a mathematical pattern, but future generations would realize its importance. Decades later, another thinker named Joseph Juran began studying quality management. Juran was one of the pioneers of modern quality improvement. While analyzing production problems, he remembered Pareto's work. He noticed something similar. A small number of defects caused most quality issues. A small number of problems created most losses. A small number of causes generated most consequences. Juran popularized Pareto's idea and called it the vital few and trivial many, not because the many were unimportant, but because the few often had a disproportionately large impact. This insight transformed manufacturing. Instead of trying to fix everything, organizations could focus on the few factors creating the biggest problems. The results were extraordinary. Soon businesses around the world started noticing the same pattern. 20% of customers often generated 80% of revenue. 20% of products generated most sales. 20% of employees produced a large share of results. 20% of marketing efforts generated most leads. Again, the exact numbers varied, but the pattern persisted. A small number of inputs produced most outputs. This changed how companies operated. Instead of spreading resources equally everywhere, leaders began identifying their highest impact activities. Efficiency increased, profitability increased, productivity increased, all because of one simple observation. Then something even more surprising happened. Researchers started finding Pareto-like patterns throughout nature. A small percentage of earthquakes release most seismic energy. A small number of stars contain much of the mass in certain regions. A minority of roads handle the majority of traffic. A minority of websites receive most internet visits. A minority of books generate most sales. A minority of scientific papers receive most citations. The pattern seemed almost universal. It appeared across economics, biology, technology, business, and social systems. Why? Because many systems contain feedback loops. Success often creates more success. Resources attract more resources. Attention attracts more attention. Small advantages grow over time. This is where the story becomes even more fascinating. To understand the Pareto Principle, we must understand compounding. Imagine two people starting at the same place. One improves slightly every day, the other remains the same. At first, the difference is tiny, almost invisible, but over months and years, the gap becomes enormous. Small advantages compound, small improvements multiply, small gains accumulate. This process naturally creates unequal outcomes, and that is exactly what Pareto observed. The world is not always linear. Many systems are exponential. Results often grow faster than effort. Think about social media. Millions of people create content, but a small percentage receive most views. Think about music. Thousands of songs are released daily, yet a handful dominate global charts. Think about sports. Thousands of athletes compete, but only a small number earn most sponsorships and attention. Think about business. Thousands of companies exist, but a small percentage generate most profits. The pattern repeats endlessly, not because life is unfair, but because many systems amplify success. Early advantages often compound into larger advantages. This creates what mathematicians call a power law distribution, and power laws are closely related to the Pareto principle. Many people misunderstand the 80-20 rule. They think it is a strict mathematical law. It is not. Pareto never claimed that exactly 20% always creates exactly 80%. The percentages change. The real lesson is deeper. Results are often distributed unevenly. Some actions matter far more than others. Some decisions create enormous consequences. Some opportunities have extraordinary leverage. Understanding this can completely change how you work and live. Imagine studying for an exam. Not every chapter contributes equally. Certain concepts may determine most of your score. Imagine running a business. Not every task contributes equally. Some activities drive most growth. Imagine learning a skill. Not every lesson is equally important. Certain fundamentals create most progress. The challenge is identifying those critical few factors. That is where true effectiveness begins. This idea explains why many people stay busy but make little progress. They focus on everything. They treat every task as equally important. But the world doesn't work that way. Some tasks are high impact. Others are low impact. Some opportunities are transformational. Others are distractions. Stay with deep thinking. Now subscribe channel and share your friends. The Pareto Principle teaches us to search for leverage. Leverage is the ability to produce larger results with smaller effort. It is the art of finding the vital few, the actions that matter most, the decisions that matter most, the relationships that matter most, the skills that matter most. Think about the greatest achievements in history. Rarely do they come from random effort, they come from concentrated effort, focused effort, strategic effort. The people who achieve extraordinary results often identify high leverage opportunities. They find the few actions that create massive outcomes, then they double down on them. This is not luck, it is understanding how systems work. And this understanding traces back to Pareto's observations more than a century ago. What makes Pareto's discovery so remarkable is its simplicity. He didn't invent a complicated machine. He didn't discover a new continent. He didn't create a revolutionary technology. He simply noticed a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight, a pattern most people overlooked, and yet that pattern continues influencing the world today. Business leaders use it, entrepreneurs use it, investors use it, students use it, scientists use it, managers use it, productivity experts use it. All because one curious man decided to pay attention to the numbers. Vilfredo Pareto passed away in 1923, but his legacy remains stronger than ever. His work reminds us that reality often hides beneath the surface. The obvious is not always the truth. The majority of effort does not always create the majority of results. Sometimes the biggest outcomes come from surprisingly small causes, and when we learn to identify those causes, we gain a powerful advantage. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by endless tasks, endless information, or endless choices, remember Pareto. Ask yourself, which 20% of my actions create 80% of my results? Which relationships create the most value? Which skills create the greatest opportunities? Which habits have the biggest impact on my future? Because the answers to those questions may change everything, just as one observation changed everything for Vilfredo Pareto, a man who looked at numbers, a man who noticed a pattern, and a man whose discovery continues to shape the modern world. The Pareto Principle, the hidden pattern behind success, productivity, wealth, and countless systems around us. A simple idea, a profound truth, and one of the most influential discoveries in human history. Stay with deep thinking. Now subscribe channel and share your friends.